The Handkerchief by Great 78.
Chapter 133 Death and Divulgence. The three Slytherins still chuckled quietly at Theo's joke, a way of coping before having to take care of the macabre task that lay just outside the door. They moved first Urquhart, and then, after a moment's indecision, Avery, into the charms classroom. Whilst the man had surely done unspeakable things in his life, his penultimate act had been to spare them their lives. Just as the three Slytherins were leaving the classroom, a coin warmed in Draco's pocket. It was Remus. "Near the gates leading to Hogsmeade. Battle is fierce here. Are you able to help?" Draco knew that it must be bad if Remus was asking him for help. He told the other Slytherins, who immediately agreed to go. The three disillusioned themselves and hurried back through the castle, encountering pockets of fighting between Death Eaters and the Resistance as they went. Occasionally a crumpled body or a tied-up Death Eater jarred their sensibilities, but they pushed on. In the entrance hall, Draco looked around for signs of either Hermione or Colin and Violetta. Violin, his brain supplied unnecessarily. He saw neither. He spotted Dean Thomas fighting alongside Seamus Finnegan. "Have you seen Hermione?" he asked as they approached. "Not for a while, now," answered Dean, wiping his brow. Seamus, out of breath, conjured a drinking glass and filled it with water from his wand. He drained it, then refilled it for his friend. "We're heading out onto the grounds. Remus is fighting near the Hogsmeade gates and needs help," Draco told them. "We're with you, then," Seamus said forcefully. Remus had been right. The battle just outside the school's gates was fierce. In addition to Death Eaters and Imperious Ministry workers, Draco also spotted a handful of Inferi. He sent a glance at Seamus Finnegan, wondering if the wizard remembered their discussion from Defense Against the Dark Arts in 6th year. From the way that the sandy-haired wizard was shooting jets of carefully controlled flames, he did. "All right, Remus?" Draco asked, standing back to back with the man, each fighting a combatant. "Not too bad, considering everything," Remus replied. Draco was hesitant to ask, but the other wizard needed to know that his wife was possibly in the battle. Did Tonks find you?" "Yes." Remus's voice was ragged with emotion now. "I told her that I loved her, but to please go home. I only hope she listened." Draco was silent, focusing on fighting and parrying curses. After a moment he was able to petrify the person in front of him, then incarcerate them. He was turning to face the next fight, when a familiar voice called out, "Remus!" He and Remus both looked in the direction of the voice, spotting a flash of pink hair. "Tonks!" they both cried out, but Remus was having to fight off the Imperious Ministry worker against whom he was battling. Draco ran instead to her, then pulled up short, to see the person she was facing. Wands drawn. Bellatrix's maniacal eyes roved over Draco, who was already battle-weary and bloodied from his earlier scuffles and from healing Blaze. "Ah!" She stretched out the syllable languidly. "It's Nephikins! Well, isn't this just a quaint family reunion? It's perfect, I'd say. I can get rid of 2 blood traitors in one fell swoop." Draco cast a shield charm, whilst Tonks sent curse after curse at Bellatrix. They worked in silence together, side by side. When Draco's shield began to fail, Tonks put one up in its place. They parried and deflected. They sent verbal and non-verbal hexes and curses at the evil, cackling witch, but they could not touch her. Draco was doing everything he could, but it did not seem to be enough. Bellatrix did not appear to fatigue, instead coming on stronger with each new attack. Draco's arm was bleeding profusely, and Tonks was waning. He could feel a shift in the air a moment before it came. "Protego Puculus Maxima!" he cried. But in an instant, he could tell it wasn't enough. The jet of green light was coming towards them, aiming at Draco. Tonks, a loyal guardian who came from a long and noble line of protectors and safekeepers, flung out an arm and pushed him behind her at the last possible second, taking the curse instead. "No! No!" Draco screamed, and in his fury he redoubled his efforts. 100 tiny cuts appeared on Bellatrix's arms, reminding him of that night in the manor with the chandelier. "Crucio!" he shouted, pushing every bit of his pain, anger, and fury through the wand he held, hoping it was enough. Bellatrix stumbled, falling backwards, racked with pain. But after 5 or so seconds, she turned her face breathlessly to him and smiled her awful, grey smile. "Neffy dribbles! Another unforgivable! Whatever will the order say?" But then, as though she had plucked it from his mind, even though he had not even been thinking of it, she said, "Ah! But that was your first unforgivable, wasn't it? You didn't cast one at the manor, did you?" The grey smile grew wider and nastier by degrees. "Neither did you. Not really," Draco said firmly. "Talisman." His occlumency had already been in place, his mind able to focus sharply because of the tiredness of his body. Yet even with his walls firmly built, he was able to give her this word, dangle it in front of her, like a piece of meat that she could not chew. Her expression grew angrier by the second. "You fucking blood traitor!" Her fury was palpable, seething now, emphasizing every word. Then a voice boomed out in the clearing, a cold, high voice. It was loud enough that seemed to permeate every atom in the space and in the beings that occupied it. "You have fought valiantly. Lord Voldemort knows how to value bravery. Yet you have sustained heavy losses. If you continue to resist me, you will all die, one by one. I do not wish this to happen. Every drop of magical blood spilled is a loss and a waste." Draco locked eyes with Bellatrix, occlumency and his protego charm still shielding him. Next to him lay his cousin, one of the most magical people he had ever known, dead at the hands of one of the most evil he had ever known. The voice continued. "Lord Voldemort is merciful. I command my forces to retreat immediately. You have 1 hour. Dispose of your dead with dignity. Treat your injured." With a final sneer and a flourish of her wand, Bellatrix disappeared in a puff of black smoke. Still clearly trying to make up for her failures at keeping Potter at the manor, the faithful servant Bellatrix hoped to stay in his good graces, and so she followed her Dark Lord's commands to the letter. "I speak now, Harry Potter, directly to you. You have permitted your friends to die for you, rather than face me yourself. I shall wait for 1 hour in the Forbidden Forest. At the end of that hour, if you have not come to me, have not given yourself up, then battle recommences. This time, I shall enter the fray myself, Harry Potter, and I shall find you, and I shall punish every last man, woman, and child who has tried to conceal you from me. 1 hour." In the quiet, Draco simply stared at the place from which his aunt had vanished. 1 hour. 1 hour until the final master of death returns, until one way or another the battle would resume. "Nymphadora!" The plaintive, urgent cry struck Draco with the force of a hex, and he turned to see Remus looking with deep sorrow at his wife, laying peacefully on the ground, surrounded by the detritus of war. Remus's voice cracked as he spoke again with a sob, reaching for her. "Dora!" But not all of Voldemort's loyal subjects had immediately heeded his words and left the battlefield. Dolohov stood, his wand still drawn from where he'd been fighting Remus only moments before. Draco watched the man's eyes, seeing what was coming. He raised his own wand in what felt like slow motion, but it was too late. With a slow grin, Dolohov pointed his wand at the undefended wizard, the man whose shabby robes Draco had once ridiculed, but later had borrowed gratefully, the man who had encouraged him, and taught him, and advised him in so many ways. "Avada Kedavra!" Dolohov intoned, and Remus Lupin dropped to the ground, his hand outstretched to his wife's. Time seemed to freeze a moment, as everyone around them stopped in horror at the sight. Then Draco and Dean and Seamus and everyone else in the vicinity shot spells at the place where Dolohov had stood, but he was gone, disapparated through the apparition barrier that surrounded Hogsmeade. Draco was not tempted to try and follow him, but was rather sure that he could not, anyway. By now, word of his betrayal could have easily gotten to Voldemort from Bellatrix. But he was not going anywhere. His witch was here. 2 members of his family had just died here, and there was no fucking chance that he was leaving. Draco carried Tonks's body back towards the Great Hall. Blaze and Luna helped Ernie, who carried a barely conscious and badly wounded Michael Corner. Dean and Seamus carried Remus. As he walked up the steps, Draco turned back to ask Theo to hold the door open further. As he looked back, he saw a flash of brown curls, glasses, and red hair that caught his attention, crossing the grounds slowly from the direction of the Whomping Willow. He slowed, but realized that the time was not right to speak to her. She had just learned that the clock was ticking on the life of her best friend, and she needed to be with him right now. And there was Weasley, who had just lost a brother. Plus, there was no telling who else lay dead inside. He would have a chance to talk with her later. He and Dean arranged Tonks and Remus on beds that had been erected in the Great Hall for the dead. Just as they had lain outside, Remus's arm stretched out towards his wife's, and hers to him, and neither wizard could bear to change them. Draco looked up to see Hermione, Potter, and Weasley, framed in the door to the entrance hall. Her eyes flitted to him, widening in shock at the sight next to him. But Weasley was entirely focused on the tragedy that had befallen his family, and he took her by the hand, pulling her towards the rest of the Weasley clan. Draco looked down at the stone floor. He'd expected that she would go to them first, of course, but it still rankled him a bit. Neville Longbottom walked into the Great Hall with a bit of a limp, helped along by Hannah Abbott. The witch noticed Draco sitting alone at a far table, and brought Neville to him. "Draco, I'm glad you're here. Nev here is being a bit stubborn. Doesn't want to see Pomfrey." "She's dealing with a lot bigger things right now, Hannah. I can still walk all right." Hannah sighed. "Luna told me you know several healing spells. Can you help? I need to go and see if I can find Susan. I'll be right back soon." Draco nodded, then turned to the Gryffindor wearily. He cast the in-depth diagnostic charm that Ted had taught him, locating the small break in Neville's ankle that was causing him pain. "Give me an extra second. This wand is a bit resistant," Draco said with a grimace. "It's good for fighting, but healing is not its strong suit." Neville looked down at the wand Draco wielded more carefully. "Where did you get that? What happened to yours?" "Potter is using it," Draco said a bit snidely. "I had to bring my mother's here with me today, and then I went and lost it. This is one of the replacement ones." Neville grimaced in pain and tried to pass it off as a knowing smirk. "I know that feeling, using someone else's wand. My first 5 years in school here, I was using my father's wand. It always felt a bit resistant, but I didn't know any better. It was the only wand I'd ever used. When I got my own at Ollivander's, it was like the difference between night and day." Draco chuckled a bit, carefully mending the broken bone. "Is that why you were such shit at fighting and doing magic, Longbottom?" "Hey, I nearly whipped your ass in the stands at the Quidditch match in first year." Neville smiled a bit nostalgically. "If I hadn't been so distracted by Hermione, you wouldn't have stood a chance, mate." Neville smiled and looked over at Draco's witch, who was rubbing the shoulders of Ginny Weasley as she wept. Hermione looked over at them and gave Draco a small smile. Weasley was also watching the two wizards, and from the looks of it had seen Neville and Draco's entire interaction. His expression was a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Neville stood up. "Thanks for the healer session, Malfoy. I'll see you soon." "Where are you headed?" Draco asked, dragging his eyes away from Hermione. "Just going to walk the grounds. See if anyone needs help out there." Draco made as if to stand. "I can come with you." But at that moment, Hermione looked at Draco pointedly, then tilted her head at the main doors, asking him to follow. The gesture was not unnoticed by Neville. "No, you're busy." Neville gave a parting nod and smile, and stepped out into the hall, into the entrance hall. Draco started towards the front doors of the hall, but out of the corner of his eye caught the motion of Weasley, grabbing the arm of his witch. He nearly altered course to say something to the wizard, but decided the timing wasn't the best. Hermione looked back over at him quickly, then back at Weasley. She said something to him, then pointed to the doors. Weasley nodded reluctantly, and Hermione hurried out past Draco, without looking at him. Just as she crossed the threshold into the entrance hall, his handkerchief warmed with her message. "Broom cupboard." Draco slipped out of the room quickly, stepping unobtrusively to the broom cupboard and pulling open the door quickly. Turning to check the entrance hole, he backed into the cupboard and closed the door. Her arms snaked around his waist, pulling him into a hug. He wrapped his arms around her tightly. "Merlin, Hermione, thank God you're alive," he said, peppering her forehead and temple with kisses. "You too. It's been harrowing." She buried her head in the crook of his shoulder. "We've just come back from the Shrieking Shack. Snape is dead." "What?" Draco's mind was blank with shock. "How?" "Voldemort. He had Nagini bite Snape and kill him with the venom, so that he could become the true master of the Elder Wand. Voldemort left right afterwards, and Snape gave Harry a memory. Then we saw Snape die." "God, Hermione, he died. He died because of me. If I had been able to just stick to the task, he wouldn't have needed to step in." Draco's forehead dropped to hers, and he squeezed his eyes shut. "Don't say that, Draco," she murmured. Draco could practically feel the revulsion and ache in her voice. "I'm sorry you had to see Snape die," he whispered. She pulled away, looking deeply into his eyes. Her eyes were glassy with tears, but now also held a bit of sorrowful something. Was it regret? "And I'm sorry, but I need to tell you about something else that happened tonight." Chapter 134. Confessions. Draco felt his heart nearly stop after her next words. "I'm sorry, but I need to tell you about something else that happened tonight." 3 minutes later, Hermione left the cupboard. 30 seconds after that, Draco stalked angrily back into the great hall, keeping his eyes averted from the two of them. He could feel her gaze following him across the room as he walked. He'd promised Hermione that he wouldn't say anything to Weasley, but inside he was seething. He moved to the far side of the great hall, to one of the house tables that had been pushed against a wall. He sat facing the darkened, pre-dawn windows on the furthest bench. Draco was a maelstrom of emotions. Hurt, anger, fear, confusion. He understood how it happened, but understanding didn't take away the sting of it. As he sat, his handkerchief heated with another message. Taking a deep breath, he spoke the password and read what she had to say. But it wasn't addressed to him. She was talking to Weasley.
"Ron, can we talk? Maybe over there?"
Draco looked up, peering between two witches who stood, blocking him from view. Hermione was gesturing him closer to where she'd watched Draco go. Draco slouched lower in his seat. They settled on the bench on the other side of the table, about 8 feet from where he sat. He inhaled, then exhaled deeply, trying to force himself to calm down. He appreciated that she was willing to let him hear her side of things, but he wished that he knew what Weasley was saying back to her. Maybe they'd come a bit closer and I could listen in, he thought. With a flash of inspiration, he remembered the extendable ears that the Weaselette had given him. They hadn't been given for this purpose, but Draco had to hear both sides of this conversation. He summoned them from the magically extended rucksack and placed one end in his ear, in the ear facing away from the great hall, so that no one would notice him using them. The other side he directed towards Hermione and Weasley. He watched in fascination for a moment as his and Hermione's magic manifested, her words appearing both on the handkerchief and resounding in his ear. But after a few seconds, he became absorbed in their conversation.
"Ron, I wanted to talk privately for a moment, if that's all right. I know right now it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster, and perhaps this isn't the best time to do this. But tonight, in the Shrieking Shack, well, when we were with Snape and we witnessed his final minutes, I kind of realized something."
"What was it?"
The ginger's voice was guarded. Perhaps he could tell that this conversation might not go the way that he initially thought it would. "Well, you know that Snape was a legilimens. He had the ability to project images and thoughts when he wanted to. I don't think he used it very often, but I think in that moment, as he was dying—" At this, Hermione paused to suppress a small sob.
"What did he show you?"
Weasley sounded curious and possibly a bit angry at the idea of Snape sharing something private with Hermione. Hermione sighed. "Snape loved someone. I don't think it's right that I share who I believe it was. And when he was in school, he felt as though he could never act on it, that they were wrong together. I think it was his biggest regret in life, not telling her sooner before she married someone else."
"I can understand that. That's kind of how I feel about—"
Draco surreptitiously looked over at the two of them. Hermione's eyes were downcast, and Weasley attempted to take her by the hands, but she pulled back, halting his words with her actions. "No, please, Ron, don't. That's what I hope to talk about," Hermione began, but Weasley spoke over her.
"Hermione, are you telling me there's someone else? Do you mean that you feel that way about someone else?"
Hermione took a deep breath, held it for a moment, and then blew it out, ruffling the hair at her temple. "Yes, there is someone else. There has been, for a long time. I never wanted to tell you and Harry because I was afraid of your judgment, just like Snape was afraid of the judgment of his friends. But after seeing the pain and the regret in his eyes, I can't go on living a lie forever."
"Who is it?"
Weasley demanded. "Ron, Hermione, I can tell it's not someone I'm going to like. You wouldn't have kept it a secret for a long time if it was Neville, a dean."
"No, I suppose you're right."
"And to be honest, at this point, very little can surprise me. So much has happened today. I think if you told me it was Draco Malfoy, I wouldn't even be shocked." There was complete silence on the other end of the extendable ears. Draco held his breath until he felt as though he might turn blue. Weasley's voice had grown flat. "It's Draco Malfoy, isn't it?" Hermione cleared her throat, shuffling her feet a bit under the table. Finally she said in a very tiny voice, "Yes." "Holy fuck," Weasley said in a voice that sounded decimated with shock, tinged with rage. "Holy fuck, are you kidding me? That asshole whose house we were nearly killed in. The one that tried to kill Dumbledore last year. And me and Katie. His aunt fucking tortured you, Hermione. Tortured you. And his friends almost burned us alive an hour or so ago. One of them shot the killing curse at you. At both of us." As he spoke, the wizard's voice grew angrier and louder, more agitated.
I don't know that Draco was ever really friends with Crabbe and Goyle. And if you think back, he was trying to stop Crabbe before he summoned the Fiendfire."
"But Dumbledore, Hermione, and fucking Bellatrix!" Weasley sounded broken, anguished, nearly in tears now.
"You remember, Harry said he was lowering his wand against Dumbledore. He didn't want to do it, but he was afraid that Voldemort would use Legilimens against him, and see us, together, in his memories. He was doing it to protect me and our relationship. He just went about it the wrong way."
"The wrong way?" Weasley cried. "The wrong way? Hermione, that's an understatement."
"I know, Ron, but he was desperate. Voldemort told him that if he didn't kill Dumbledore, that his parents were dead, and that he was too. And he knew that Voldemort would torture him. Read his thoughts, see me. He didn't want Voldemort coming after me. And in any case, I believe there's more to the story, but there's nothing to be done about that right now." Hermione looked around briefly. "I think that Harry is maybe finding out about all of it as we speak."
"Does Harry know? About you and Malfoy?" Weasley cut in. He pronounced Malfoy as though he was saying pestilence or swamp mud.
"No, and I don't think now is the time to share it with him. To be honest, now was not really the time to share it with you, with everything else going on, with Fred and Remus and Tonks. But I didn't want us to go on with secrets between us, especially after what happened between us earlier. I cared too much for you, Ron."
"So what was that in the room of requirement, then? Just a kiss between friends? What's your snake boyfriend going to say about that?" Weasley said snarkily.
"I truly apologize, Ron. I was so excited. You have always made excuses about how house elves are always happy to serve us, how they like being told what to do, and just then, at that moment, you were thinking not just of others, but of house elves, specifically as needing autonomy and protection. It was the first time that you said they could think for themselves, and it meant so much to me. As a Muggle-born, I've always struggled to be seen as an equal within the wizarding world, and for you to recognize house elves as beings that were able to make their own decisions, that shouldn't be ordered to their deaths."
Hermione laughed a bit in embarrassment. Weasley was silent for a moment. Then he huffed out a humorless laugh, too. You were going for a kiss on the cheek, weren't you?" Hermione blushed to her roots and gave him a wincing smile.
"Yes. I'm so sorry, Ron."
It was Hermione's turn to reach for the red-headed wizard's hands. Weasley did not draw away in disgust, but he did not look overly happy to be touching her. I'm going to need some time on this, Hermione. Fucking Malfoy. I mean, Bellatrix. He withdrew one hand and ran it through his hair. About that, she didn't actually torture me. She thought she did, Hermione added hastily, seeing his look of disbelief at this proclamation. But Draco, well, he made a talisman with Luna and Ollivander and his elves. Weasley shook his head. Honestly, Hermione, this is all too much for me right now. I love you, I care for you, but my mind feels like, I don't know. It's kind of like the tentacles in the tank at the end of 5th year, all over again. There's 1,000 different things to consider, and I feel like I don't know which way is up right now. He exhaled a long breath and was silent for a time before resuming. I'm not saying this discussion is over. I'm not cutting you out of my life or anything, and I'm sure as hell not accepting Draco Malfoy as my best mate. Hermione's silent sob turned into a laugh at his words. But you are a smart person, and you don't seem imperious or confounded or like you got whacked on the head or anything. So I don't think you're lying, but I'm going to need time here. Weasley slumped a bit against the table, dropping his head onto it. Hermione ran a hand over his ginger hair in a soothing way. I love you, Ron. Thank you. It was a long moment before the wizard answered. Finally, he heaved a sigh and said, I love you too, Hermione. And I've lost far too many people that I love today. You're not going to be one of them. With that, Weasley sat up and hugged her, then slunk slowly back across the room to the rest of the Weasleys. The oldest Weasley, the one married to Fleur, the one with the ponytail and the earring that Draco thought might be named Bill, had watched their whole exchange out of the corner of his eye. He alone of the Weasley sons likely had some idea of who Draco was, to the Order and to Hermione. He had seen Draco from his vantage point, watching the two Gryffindors as they spoke. Now he gave his brother a commiserating look, and pulled him in for a hug, which Weasley gladly accepted. Arthur, who had also noticed Hermione and his son in deep discussion, and who also knew of Draco's role in the Order and in Hermione's life, approached the two of them and put his arms around them both. The three of them hugged and wept, for their family and for each other. Draco looked back at Hermione and found her gaze upon him, copper eyes shining with unshed tears. That was so difficult. I hope with time he will understand. But it is true. Most of your friends know, but mine don't. All this time I've been afraid to tell my friends, but I don't want it to be like that any more. She blew out a deep breath and stood. I'm going to go for a short walk, maybe to the library to clear my head, and I should go and find Lavender and Parvati. If it's all right, I just need a little bit of time alone. He looked down at the handkerchief, where the words had appeared immediately after she spoke them. Draco answered back, I understand. If you change your mind and need company, let me know. And for what it's worth, he took that a lot better than I thought he would. Hermione huffed a laugh. Don't forget your extendable ears. I love you. He wrote back, I love you too.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Handkerchief by Great78.